Hey, it's Galfi and Galfette. Today I'm going to show you how to convert audio to MIDI and vice versa. We'll talk about it right after this. Feel free to add a like to this video, it's always a big help for us to keep making videos. You can also subscribe to our channel and activate the bell if you find our videos interesting. First of all, why convert audio to MIDI? There are several possible applications. For example, recently I wanted to add a synth track to some guitar arpeggios, and I'm a terrible keyboard player. So I did what I show in the video about the chord track, whose link you'll find in the description. I converted the guitar arpeggios into a MIDI track. Once I'd done that, I played the MIDI score through a synth like Pad Shop, which comes as standard with Cubase. This allowed me to have a synth track without having to touch a single key on my keyboard myself. Another advantage of converting to MIDI is that you can play with the duration and intensity of each note. You'll see that, as I explained in another video about the difference between audio track, MIDI track and instrument track, and I'll put the link in the description there too. You can play with the velocity of each note. The bluer the note, the less it will be heard. The redder it is, the louder it will be. You can also adjust note length, create new notes, etc., as I explained in a previous video dedicated to the key editor. Converting audio to MIDI is actually very simple. Select your audio event, double-click and you're in the audio editor. Then go to Vari Audio and select Edit Vari Audio. Here you see the notes for the audio part. Here, at the very bottom, you can choose a function, and you'll see Extract MIDI. Choose the options you want and click OK. You'll see that a new track appeared, a MIDI track with the MIDI information from my audio part. Converting MIDI to audio works a little differently. Why convert MIDI to audio? Here's just one example. I have a drum line created with EasyDrummer, which is not a Steinberg plugin. If I want to send this drum line to a friend who has Cubase, but who doesn't have EasyDrummer, he'll have to have this MIDI event interpreted by another drum editor. So he won't get the same sound as me. Another advantage is when mixing, converting all MIDI parts to audio not only saves your computer resources, but also avoids misinterpretations by VST, or trim reverb tails, reverse or even resample, and visualizing the waveform. Please note, exporting MIDI data alone will not generate sound. For a MIDI track to produce sound, it must be driven by an instrument or VST. We're going to talk here about exporting a MIDI instrument track to audio. As far as I know, there are two ways of exporting MIDI to audio. First option, you set the MIDI track you want to export to solo by activating this button. Then go to File, Export, Audio Mix Down. Choose the export folder here. I advise you either to create a specific folder, or, rather, to choose the project audio folder, which groups together all the audio parts. I also recommend exporting to WAV for better quality. You can also choose your sample rate, bit depth, etc. All that's left is to click on Export Audio. The second way of exporting MIDI to audio is more interesting, since you can export several MIDI parts or several MIDI tracks at the same time. I select several MIDI events by drawing a selection area with the mouse. I can also select several MIDI tracks instead of drawing a selection, using Shift plus mouse click for adjacent tracks or Control plus mouse click for tracks that are distributed differently. I go to Edit, Render in Place. I choose to display render settings. Once you've selected the options you want, click on Render. And you can see that my MIDI files have been rendered as audio files. If you have questions or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment. Have a great weekend and see you next week.